sent me slides.
Dan sent me slides.
Today, the journalism industry faces many challenges. So we're introducing the Google News Initiative, our effort to enable journalism to thrive in a digital age. It will enable new models for sustainable journalism, elevate quality journalism, and ensure that technology allows journalists to do their jobs even better. Because when journalism succeeds, we all do.
Try to plug and unplug. We're the technical guy.
Welcome to the...
And my bag is there, so I think...
Okay, great.
You can move aside. Could you grab me the bag?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, how are you?
So,
Okay.
journalism festival?
And were you able to grab it? Or?
Not yet. But
So is this connected to...
you'll go last, so I'll be able to.
Like, no.
USB-C, I can...
So it's okay because we'll have the computer...
Oh,
I mean, I have one on my computer.
yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we plan that? Because we'll be passing it around. Okay. I think we'll get underway. We're at time here, or at the starting time. So, welcome everyone to this IJF 19 panel on deepfakes, shallow fakes, and real deal journalism. I am not certain that we will resolve any issues today, nor certainly figure out how we create real deal journalism, but you will be hearing from my esteemed panelists on a project that we ran this last year called Verificar, a general framing of the challenges around content verification, and on some emerging bleeding edge technologies. So my name is Ed Bice. I'm CEO at Meedan, and I'll be moderating. We're going to hear 3 presentations, and then we'll open up audience questions. So I want to start by noting that Sam Gregory is in the audience, and Sam has done more research and thinking on the issue of deepfakes than the 4 of us combined. So, if you've got really difficult questions, I'll direct them to Sam. Sorry, Sam. But let me just introduce the 3 panelists, and then we'll move from Alba. We'll start, and then Tom, and then Dan. So. I met Alba this last year during the Verificar project. Brilliant journalist, brilliant leader of journalists, brilliant talent, and you'll hear more about that project. I work every day with Tom, so I'm a huge fan of Tom's, and he directs, designs, implements programs at Meedan, which means he's usually on an airplane or putting Post-it notes on a board. And lastly, Dan Schultz. Dan and I have been, Dan and I have been frenemies for quite some time. And Dan's organization, the Bad Idea Factory, is attempting a hostile takeover of my organization, and my organization's attempting a hostile takeover of Bad Idea Factory. The fact that we work together on the Montage project makes it very interesting. But you'll hear Dan is a brilliant technologist from MIT Media Lab and is working on some excellent stuff, and you'll hear more about that, I'm sure.
I think that might be a deep fake of some kind. Yeah.
Oh, the picture. No, that's not a deep fake. Yeah, that's so. I'm going to pass it off to Alba now, who's going to talk about the Verificar project.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to briefly talk about Verificado 2018. This was a project we made last year, where we basically built up a newsroom to fight misinformation during the election presidential campaign in Mexico. So just an overview first of the initiative. This was the founders of the initiative were Animal Político, which is a digital Mexican outlet, pop-up newsroom, and AJ Español. This is how the newsroom looked like. So we built a core newsroom that was focused on verification and fact-checking of the viral images and information that were circulating in social media. And we've built an alliance of more than 90 different media outlets, universities, NGOs, who were distributing that content, that fact-checked, verified content. And so this initiative ran for 4 months, and we were in Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. We also had a website, and we were using the hashtag I want you to verify in Spanish. So it was very audience-centric. It basically worked on demand. People were sending us different stuff via WhatsApp, for example. And on the election weekend, we built a physical newsroom where all, the different partners were also included. These are a bit of like the numbers and scales that Verificado had in different social media to give an idea of the impact that we had in Mexico. But I want to talk about the multimedia side or the video side of the initiative, because it wasn't just about, fact-checking and then writing an article, a text-based article, and publishing. Our premise was really that in the current information ecosystem, it's not about the article anymore. It's about so many other types of media. So for the first time in this kind of initiative, we've built a multimedia and innovation desk that was basically trying to make sense of this. I've tried to put together this ecosystem where it's about the memes, it's about the audio files that they send you on WhatsApp, it's about this video that goes viral. And so we've tried to build, to have a daily output of information that was, reliable and clear among the noise. So this means reliable information, clear information among the media noise or the social media noise. Some of the challenges that we faced at the time is how do we make our debunks go viral, right? Because if you write a long article where you sort of like go through why this is false or why this is not so true, you're going to reach a certain audience that's very specialized and it's like the red circle of public policy makers and stuff. But how do you reach younger audiences? How do you really break the fact-checking filter bubble? So one of the ways that we had some success was building this Verificar 2018 hardcore newsroom, then replicating, in different social media accounts. But the great thing was really to have partners that had mainstream TV shows who were, quoting our content, and also national local newspapers, radio shows who were also talking about our debunks in Verificado, digital native media, civil society, and universities. So really it made a whole transmedia project. This is the team, the multimedia team working on Verificado pieces, and our mantra really was that we need to fight rumors and conspiracy theories with engaging and powerful narratives that really leverage the same techniques of disinformation. So that really was our mantra. That really we had it on our newsroom. And so our goal was to make easily shareable pieces of information that really had the audience at the very center. So how did we go about this? First, we built a WhatsApp channel. Because in Mexico, WhatsApp is widely used, and there's a lot of misinformation. We noticed very early that a lot of the misinformation that was going on during the elections went through Verificado. So we built a team who not only received messages like, could you please verify this meme that I've received, or this photo that I've received, but also we were distributing content that was specifically tailored for WhatsApp. So these are just some examples. So you would have, we would send you graphics, we would send you the original photo of different content that was sent to us. The thing about WhatsApp really was that it's very labor intensive. So we had 3 people working only on the WhatsApp account. And we've developed this format called Verificado that was tailored specifically for WhatsApp. It's on demand, so we would send you different, like graphics that people were talking about on social media or that were sent to us first on WhatsApp. We've focused on images that were easily shareable and very, focusing on clarity to fight the misinformation. So, for example, on the top where it says falso is fake, this was a meme that went widely viral, and at the bottom where it says verificado, we would, debunk the image and show you like the real connections, family connections among these very powerful people that appear on this photo. And one interesting thing that we've noticed is that pieces of misinformation that went viral on social media, we would receive those days before on our WhatsApp account. So in a way, like, it was a great way to be on the front line of misinformation in Mexico on WhatsApp. We also experimented with statuses. So we would use, this feature that's like stories, but on WhatsApp, to just show our latest debunks, our latest videos, so people could, we wouldn't be spamming people and sending debunks that they didn't ask for, but if they wanted to go to statuses to see what's the latest, we would send the video later. They would just reply the statuses, and we would send you the full video on WhatsApp. We also used voice notes to clarify the more complex stories that couldn't fit in an image. And here's some examples of the visuals debunks that we've made. So we had this section called Obviously Photoshop. The GIF is not playing, but it was basically a GIF. So this is Obama with an AMLO t-shirt. AMLO is now the current president. So we will have this GIF where we, show you the original photo. I'm sorry, the GIF is not running, but photos like that, like shallow fakes, right? So you would have Putin with a photo of AMLO, and then we would show you the original photo, right? Or we would have also like a viral image like this one. The candidate is now the president, and the pro-establishment TV host is a very traditional, very well-known and famous host. So this image went wildly viral because it sort of like captured the mood of the country where, the anti-establishment sort of like overcomes the traditional power in Mexico. So we debunked this image. We of course, shared this image, but we also made a video where you could see, let me see, I'm not sure how to play this. Anyhow, we've made this video where we sort of like break down exactly how this image was produced in Photoshop, right? So, because this was a full interview program. I wish I could show you the video. For some reason, I'm not able to. Oh, it's showing? Oh, sorry, it's not showing in my computer then. So anyhow, so we sort of like went through how this image is produced and sort of like informed the audience how this media is created.
Could you translate this for us, so that we understand what sort of things you're picking up on?
So we are basically saying, explaining the process of how, first we say we watched the full interview TV show, and we can now affirm and say this is a manipulated image. So first we were very transparent on our process in verifying, and then we sort of like run through the process of like, okay, so how was this image produced, right? Or like, these are examples of shallow fakes. This is AMLO, with Chavez, AMLO with this very powerful syndicate woman. So this is an example of the fakes that were wildly popular during the presidential campaign. So, at the beginning of this project, I thought, we'll have the opportunity to work on these really deep fakes, elaborated, complex stuff. And the reality of it in Mexico last year was that the shallow fakes, like this one, were the ones that were wildly shared. And I was astonished to see how many people actually blindly believe in many of these images that for us journalists are clearly like a fake image. So here's another GIF. This is debunk that took us months of work. We've published a long story on our website where we were very transparent about the process. This was a fake that basically said that the wife of this candidate was the niece of a famous Nazi, a Nazi official from Germany. So once we had this debunk, what we did was produce this GIF that was easily shareable everywhere, and that sort of broke down the whole process. But this is a way to really break the filter bubble, just produce a GIF that breaks it down. And then, about the shallow fakes, I think the media literacy content plays a great role, just helping the audience navigate all the noise. So we've produced videos like, 6 signs that some news story is a fake, or how much does a tweet for a candidate cost in Mexico, or how do bots position certain trending hashtags or topics for a candidate. And we also found that tutorials were very useful. For example, how do you verify an image on your cell phone? So as you see the sneakers on the top, they have the logo of a party in Mexico. This was a very viral image that said, you know, this party gives out these sneakers, right? And it was like, oh, it was a scandal. So we've made this, you know, a very basic tutorial of like, how do you take this image and just on your cell phone, how do you do an image reverse search? Very basic stuff, but this is one of our most viral videos that got like millions of views. And it's surprising to us journalists because I honestly didn't expect that. But that's the information people can use, and I think that there's a great value of empowering the audience to really navigate this complex, you know, media ecosystem. Here's some photos of the newsroom, and that's about it. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Alba. Okay, now Tom is going to give an overview of some of the work we've been doing in the space, which goes beyond Verificado, and we do have a couple of Credibility Coalition team members in the audience, Dwight and Jenny. So shout out to them, and Nat, Meedan team member as well. Okay, Tom.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining today. So we've been working at Meedan on tools and training and trying to establish best practices around verification since 2011, basically. I was working as a journalist and translator in Cairo at the time. We were translating and looking at a lot of citizen content that was coming from Syria and Egypt and Bahrain and Libya, and realized that there was a real need for a kind of transparent verification process around this extremely engaging media. So this was kind of videos and images that showed protest and oppression against protest. Stuff from Syria was showing kind of brutal strikes, sometimes chemical strikes. And so we realized that we needed kind of processes to ask the right questions about this kind of content. And I think one of the lessons that we've seen and has kind of come up over and over again is that the visual content is particularly prone to going viral. It's engaging on a way that text claims often are not. And we know that the people kind of driving mis and disinformation, they're very aware of this. And so what I wanted to just show you a little bit is kind of looking back over the years, what are the different kind of types of visual content that we've seen, and the processes that we can use to sort of investigate that, and just a quick glimpse at how can we prepare for a future. And so, as I'm sure people who spend any time on Twitter or Facebook have seen, one of the by far the most common kind of misinformation trend that we see is old content that is miscontextualized and reproduced with a claim that it shows something recent. And so after any storm, after any terror attack, any protest, any political rally, there will be content that is published that likely will go viral to a certain degree, that is old, or from a different place or from a different time. And this is extremely easy to create on the part of somebody who wants to spread this kind of thing. So in Syria, for example, we'd see videos from Gaza and Egypt and Bahrain from 2009, 2003, recycled, claiming to show a new news event. This is extremely, extremely common because it's extremely easy to do. But it also still can catch journalists off guard. So the Daily Mail ran with this. it's also easy to debunk. And so one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is training in how to do things like reverse image search, which actually you don't need to be a journalist to do. And I think what Verificar showed is that there's a real interest in the kind of general public about how can we do the kind of very basic steps of verification. I think that there's an increasing, almost like a social pressure not to be the person who shares that really obvious thing. And I think one of the goals of projects like Verificar and others can be to help provide that information. So miscontextualized, by far the most common kind of fake thing that we see, pretty easy to debunk. Shouldn't really be a challenge. Second kind of thing we see is manipulated content, and I think this gets to deepfakes. So this is a video from, I think it went viral in around 2015. Again, it's kind of visual and engaging. It shows the eagle swooping down, picking up the child. This actually was a video that was part of a university course in Canada. The eagle here is 3D rendered, the child is 3D rendered. So this is kind of like the early prototype of how can we manipulate video in a very convincing way. Now this is not easy to do, right? This is kind of a graduate level course at a Canadian university, but it is kind of powerful. This was, again, viewed millions of times. And it's quite hard to debunk. In this case, people were able to debunk this based on a shadow that was visible in one frame that was not visible in the next frame. So if you do kind of very detailed frame-by-frame analysis and look for the kind of internal consistency, you can spot these things. But that's, unlike the kind of miscontextualized content, that's something that requires a certain level of technical ability to kind of slow this stuff down and look very closely for the internal details. This stuff is so miscontextualized stuff, easy to make, easy to debunk. Manipulated stuff is kind of a next level of difficulty to create and to debunk. And then finally, we can look at kind of staged content. I'm sure people here are familiar with the Syria Hero Boy video. Again, this went viral in 2014. It's an extremely powerful video. I'm not going to show it because I don't think we need to see it, but extremely powerful video. There's audio in Syrian dialect Arabic. It looks very convincingly like a kind of Syrian scene. It shows a little boy getting shot, then getting back up, picking up his sister and kind of running away. This was a completely staged production. So this was shot in Malta by a Norwegian film director. And so in this case, this is kind of not deepfake, not manipulated. This is kind of media that's created. I don't know if this was created with the intent to mislead. I think it was trying to make a point about the plight of children in the Syrian conflict. But if you just purely looked at the content here, it's extremely difficult from a journalistic perspective to debunk this. The way that we are able to kind of confirm that this was actually by looking more, not at the content, but by looking at the source. So this video appeared on a very new YouTube account that had never published a video. You never see a new account made that the first video they publish is one that goes wildly viral. And so that was the kind of red flag that triggered us to that. But if you're looking purely at the content, it's extremely difficult to verify. And so in terms of kind of cost to create and difficulty to debunk, this is kind of roughly how I would frame it. Staged content is very expensive to create. That required a full film crew, actors, a scene in Malta to make. Manipulated content requires technical ability, but not the kind of full film production value. Miscontextualized content is extremely easy to create. It's just copying an old image, attaching some new text, and publishing it. But very easy to debunk through reverse image search, that kind of thing. So this is what we've seen. I think looking forward, some other examples that are slightly more challenging. So miscontextualized stuff on Twitter, YouTube is one thing. What we've started to see is old content appearing as Facebook Lives and Periscopes. So that's that's a slightly different challenge, and it's more difficult to verify that stuff in real time because it has this kind of veneer of being something that's live. I think one of the things that we might want to do is kind of bounce that to the platforms and ask them to, if there's ways that they can detect that this content is not coming from a true live source, that should be a flag. Again, so Hurricane Irma, we saw this, and it's starting to kind of crop up time and time again. And then we have, of course, the deepfakes. I'm sure everybody's seen the Obama video. This is the kind of most basic level of deepfake, I guess, is putting words in someone's mouth. But there's much more kind of advanced stuff coming down the line that can deepfake changing weather patterns or kind of way flowers interact. The future here is extremely challenging. And so how does that relate to what we were just looking at? I think that we have this kind of new challenge of stuff that is low cost to create. Those deepfakes now, it's extremely easy. There's apps that can do it pretty convincingly, a kind of user-facing level. And so I think this is the kind of risk area in the top left, where there's things that are difficult to debunk. The deep fakes of the Obama stuff, it's not intuitive that that's fake, and there are kind of technical analyses that you can do that can help us understand this. I'm hoping Dan is going to give us the solution for technical analysis of deepfakes. But it's a real challenge. It's going to take a lot of journalistic time and legwork to investigate that stuff and debunk it. In a similar way, miscontextualized live stuff, it's much more challenging. And so I think looking forwards, what we need to be prepared is for the stuff that's appearing kind of in the top left here. Low cost to create, but difficult to debunk. Journalists around the world are extremely resource stretched, and so this is the kind of warning area, I think. And so we need to look at solutions. I think that I hope that can involve working with the platforms who have access to data and resources that most newsrooms do not. But I think this is where we should kind of be focusing our energies, looking forwards.
Great. All right. Okay.
Is that long enough?
I think, do we have another foot or two? Let's see. End of the line?
Yeah, I can move over.
Okay.
No problem.
We'll do a shuffle here. So, and we're going to hear from Dan Schultz next. Dan is not credible as regards any remarks about me or my organization. Let's just start with that premise. But we are working with Bad Idea Factory on a video annotation tool called Montage that was first developed at Jigsaw. So Dan has a brilliant team of engineers surrounding him, which is a good thing, I think, because he's clearly a geopolitical actor and Dan, why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. You know, Ed, I will not take any of your bait. Don't worry. All right, so hi, everybody. My name's Dan Schultz. So actually, just to set the stage, I will not be offering any solutions to solving all of the problems that you've just been presented, but I will be talking a little bit about what's possible. And before I even start what I will be going through in this presentation, which is going to be more about the technology and use of data and the software side, there's also the human side, which I think Alba alluded to, around how do we train audiences to be more thoughtful themselves. I think one of the reasons that deepfakes right now is such a strong conversation isn't just because it's a new frontier of misinformation. It's also because I think as a global society, we're more susceptible to misinformation in general. And so I'm not going to talk about that at all, but I want to make sure we don't lose that strand, because that's a very important piece of trying to solve this as a journalism field. All right, so I'm going to be talking about using credible content to try to verify and contextualize online videos. And again, it's not going to be any, here's an example of a specific piece of software that we can all just go out and use, but it's hopefully going to help people understand what's possible and where things are moving. I used to work at a place called the Internet Archive up until fairly recently. Who here's heard of the Internet Archive or archive.org? Great, yeah. Sometimes I'm in rooms where it's like one hand. This is a community I would expect. So perfect. So for those who don't know about the Internet Archive, it's the world's biggest digital library. They're collecting sort of ephemeral data. So the internet content goes on there, and then if you change it, it's gone. What the Internet Archive is doing is it's going around and collecting it, storing it, and making it indexed and searchable so you can see what different websites looked like over time. That's very useful when you want to, verify something that you believe existed at one point. You can see if it did or did not. In addition to collecting internet data, they also have, and this is where I worked, they have a project called the Television News Archive. Video and television in particular is also ephemeral, so once it's broadcast, I'm sure it probably lives in a corporate archive somewhere, but from the perspective of the public, it's gone. And so what was aired on the BBC at 5:15 3 weeks ago? I don't know. You don't know. But you can go to the TV News you can go to the TV News Archive on the Internet Archive and actually search based on captions and watch up to, I think, a minute at a time clips of television news and see what happened there. They have, like I said, it's based on caption data. And so that is the team I worked on for about 3 years, and a lot of the stuff we did there, which is, I'm going to present on some of it, was really about treating television as data. And television here I'm kind of implicitly calling credible content, right? The idea is that if it's been broadcast on television, because of the fact that we have gatekeepers who control those airwaves and organizations with brands that in most cases rely on the trust of the public to continue to survive, we are treating TV content as example of credible content. I think that's fair. So how, as tool builders, can we use television and credible video to better understand what's going on, or maybe to, in the case of deepfakes, see what actually happened? So if you think of video, and you think of the kinds of data that's embedded in video, there's the video itself, there's audio, there's captions, which is, or transcripts, basically what are the words being said. There's information about the program itself, what is the name of the program, who's on the program, what does the tone of the program tend to be over time. There's context, what's going on in the world today, what are the related narratives about what's being said. And then there's the audience itself, who's watching it, how is it being shared online, where is it being aired. And so this is actually a slightly deeper breakdown of the possible ways you can extract data from video. So at the Internet Archive, we worked on a couple projects. I'm going to have some technical looking diagrams that I will blow past, but they're in the slides, so that way when they're shared, you can look at them if you're curious. We worked on some projects that would try to tease out different pieces of those data streams from television content. It's all open source stuff. And since being at the archive, we've used that at Bad Idea Factory, and Meedan, I'm sure we'll be leveraging some of these things to do a better job of using video in engaging and creative ways to create actually better user experiences. So we called our sort of suite of tools or suite of appliances the TV kitchen, sort of the idea that you're experimenting with television, you're experimenting with what kinds of data and recipes you can pull out of it. Here's the example of the technical diagram. So the idea is you have these kitchens that you can plug into a television stream and start to run a bunch of different processes on. You can start to do things like optical character recognition. What text is appearing on the screen? Facial recognition. Whose faces are appearing on the screen? Extracting captions, etc. Then you can upload the actual video content to places like the Internet Archive or universities or even internal archives, things like that. And the idea behind the TV kitchen as a concept is that you can then take that data and do things in those little clouds, right? So real-time alerts, knowing when different topics are being discussed on TV, or creating your own, as a journalistic organization, maybe your own archive of, hey, here are all of the clips of certain people talking. And so that way, 3 months from now, you can see, oh, they've been waffling or saying things that aren't true. Or as a consumer, maybe not as a journalistic organization, but as a media consumer, you can see, and I'll talk about a project later called the Contextual, when did certain clips appear on air and what happened around the on-air broadcasts. Maybe you can see what got edited and how things did get miscontextualized. And then the vision here, of course, is sharing that data with other organizations so that way you have access to video around the world or around a given country. Okay, so at the Internet Archive, we, I have a slide out of order. I'll just skip this one. So we worked on some projects like Face-O-Matic. It was heavy right after presidential elections, so we picked sort of the main presidential candidates, the main leaders of Senate and Congress in the United States to track on the major news networks in the US whose faces were appearing the most on different things. So we created this thing called Face-O-Matic that would say, hey, we saw Donald Trump on air at this timestamp, or that's a huge list of timestamps on CNN. We saw Mitch McConnell once for 7 seconds during a given hour-long block. We worked on a project called Third Eye, which would look at the lower thirds, or chyrons, the text that shows up on the bottom of news programs with headlines, extracting that text and then tweeting it. And this is, if you're not watching TV, this is now data that you can use to know what is the story arc of a given day, what are the major topics in a news cycle at a given time. And then finally, we worked on, and this is my out of order slide, sorry about that. We worked on some stuff around audio fingerprinting. And I think the easiest analogy to audio fingerprinting is if any of you have used an app called Shazam, where you're hearing a song and you hit a button and you hold up your phone and it figures out what the song is. That's using audio fingerprinting. It's kind of slicing up the sound, hashing it, so converting it to numbers, and comparing it with a database of other sound to see what is the match. We were using that with television, so you could do things like track when pieces of political speeches were aired on TV, or when given advertisements were aired in different places around the country. So you could sort of pick out these patterns that would normally be hidden to a computer because computers don't understand video, and it normally would be hidden to a human because humans aren't consuming all of this content at once. Okay, so that's just that's an example of the kinds of things we can do to turn video into data. And the reason it's relevant around deepfakes is because deepfakes are video. And if you can't have an algorithm able to understand that video, and if you can't fit that video into the bigger picture, which is really hard to do if you don't have an algorithm that understands it, you're kind of at a loss. You're really relying on the individual consumer to be able to say, oh, I recognize that as fake, or oh, I don't know anything about that, and I'm just going to believe it to be true. But if you can know more things about it, who's in the video, what are they talking about, when was it aired, et cetera, you can start to, before it presents to the human, you can start to tell more of the story. So we worked on Bad Idea Factory, worked on a prototype. This was funded by the Knight Foundation through their prototype challenge for misinformation. We worked on a project called the Glorious Contextual. And the idea behind it was to sort of leverage the Internet Archive's corpus of TV to do reverse video search using audio fingerprinting. So if you saw a viral video online, 5-second clip, 10-second clip, whatever, it's going crazy, everyone's tweeting it, everyone's retweeting it, but you don't know much about it aside from what you're seeing on that screen. You could use the Glorious Contextual. This was the idea, and we do have a prototype on contextual.com. You can paste a YouTube link. It will search for that video on TV. It'll say, when were pieces of this video aired on television? And then it will present, you'll be able to see the clip from TV and say, here's what happened before, here's what happened after, here's what people were saying about it on the news. So here's just some screenshots of, source check, questionable media, stand by reputable sources. And much of the team that worked on it is actually sitting in this audience, so thanks Bad Idea Factory team. And you would actually, so here's an example of the recontextualized clip. One of the things that we tried to explore, and this is kind of getting at what I mentioned in the beginning about how do we deal with the human challenge, right? Viral videos are viral because they're so easy to consume, and they're so easy to share, and they're so engaging. 60-second clips of video are less engaging, just inherently, right? It's a longer amount of time to consume it. So in addition to trying to recontextualize, we explored ways to try to make the big picture kind of as engaging as that viral one. So we started off with sort of, what if we could automatically generate a comic book version of that bigger picture? So this was just messing around and trying different interfaces. If anyone's curious, please find me or anybody else on the team. Talk to us later. Again, I'll blow past this, but this is sort of a more of an architecture diagram of what's going on behind the scenes of the Contextual bot. You have your corpus, you have audio fingerprints, and then this ability to sort of constantly ingest and expose that archived video for searching. And I'll wrap with talking a little bit about the montage project, and Ed, maybe if you want to add more context afterwards, that'd be great. But so the other side of things, and this is more, so now you have all this data, or you don't even have all the data, but you have all this video that is credible or in some way been collected and curated. Montage is a project that really helps take those pieces of video and put them into it's a content management system for video that allows you to interact with the video based on that metadata. So location is a key, location was one of the examples of the kind of metadata you can extract from video. That's very useful. So we've been working with Meedan to take the montage project and kind of add some, expose transcripts more effectively, and just make it easier to do that curation and work with curated video. So here's an example of kind of the updated screens that we're working on. But the idea, you can add tags to give more context to what the video is about, say where it is. These are generally YouTube videos. Where did this take place? And the idea is that for an end user, you'd be able to then be a little bit more thoughtful in what is it you're consuming and where does it fit into the big picture of what's going on in the world. So that's the end of my slides. Follow us on Twitter and to learn more about these projects, and thank you. Thanks for the chance to talk.
All right. So I think that's been a pretty wide-ranging set of remarks, from technologies to the kind of historical view of verification and the kind of increasing or ongoing arms race with new content manipulation technologies and our ability to verify those, and the brilliantly applied efforts of Verificado. So I'd love to open up questions from the audience on any aspect of this discussion, and we're going to have about, I think we have to clear the room at 5 of, so we've got about 7 minutes. We might be able to get through 3 questions. Please keep your questions to questions and not comments, and keep them as brief as possible, and if you want to direct them at a person, let us know.
So really quickly, as for independent journalism initiatives, how to coordinate properly doing your work, like everyday work journalism, and not exactly wasting time, but like coordinating your time by checking and publishing this information, because sometimes it takes like an overwhelming amount of this. And specifically, I have always a concern about news fact-checking initiatives that publish specifically statements. So they go on and they have to fact-check specific statements of it, but not the entire corpus of the text or the event or the news things. And what would be the most ethical and the most proper way to report it precisely, still not being completely overwhelmed by the amount of work?
And name and affiliation.
Tiago, independent.
This is something that we think about a lot when we're working on projects like Verificado, because there's a real editorial question of, okay, we might find something that's fake and maybe it's been seen by 4 people. If we as Verificado with an alliance of 90 media partners publish a debunk on that, the actual effect that we're likely to have is that more people are going to probably believe the thing than would have seen it originally. So there's always kind of an editorial threshold question of, do we want to fact check this thing? And that's based on, usually based on, is this something that people are actually seeing? It's based on, is it something that's kind of checkable that we can actually do in a reasonable amount of time? So I think that's a very practical question that journalists have to deal with all the time. There's some videos that you can debunk and investigate in 2 minutes. There are some that will take you 2 months in some cases. So you really have to sort of focus your efforts on where you can do your work with most impact. The fact checking question I didn't quite get. What was the? Yeah, I think from my side, I see a lot of this challenge, and I like the name Contextual because I think context is is the kind of missing piece in all of this field, right? And so I think wherever possible, on our end and projects like Verificado, we're trying to provide as much context as we can. And so if there's a specific line in a statement and you take that out of context, then that can be obviously misleading based on its original context. And what I think Contextual, I have an example actually I can share later. One of the first things we debunked in Verificado was a video of one of the presidential candidates saying, oh, we're going to build the wall. It was Anaya who was saying all this stuff. And it was a video that had been spliced up, taken out of context, and all these phrases where he was repeating the words of Trump, and the story was, oh, Anaya's saying that all the same things as Trump. Of course he wasn't. He was saying Trump said this, but it was stripped of its context. And so I'm really excited to have tools that can help us plug that context back into the conversation.
Yeah. Great. Another question from the audience.
Yeah, Nick Waters from Bellingcat. So you've spoken a lot about technical solutions to disinformation and fact-checking, but what do you think should be done about prominent personalities, whether politicians or journalists otherwise, who regularly spread disinformation on various platforms, both in terms of society as a whole, what could be done, and also what should the platform themselves do, whether they're social media or traditional platforms?
Small question. Alba, do you want to? You don't want to take that. Well,
I don't have I mean, it is a big question. I don't want to weigh in on what platforms should do just because it is too big of a question to dig into in a couple of minutes. I will offer that I think, so in the US, there's an organization called Politifact that kind of was one of the original fact check, the truth-o-meter, if you've ever seen it, that's where it came from. And the founder, Bill Adair, who now runs a group called the Duke Reporters Lab, which just want to shout out to that because to your question around how do we help fact checkers more effectively know what to fact check and save their time, Duke Reporters Lab is doing a lot of work exploring how to use tech to augment that fact checking process. But back to your point, Bill would often say that fact checking is a tool to help. You're not going to get a politician or a figure who wants to say something that's not true to just stop, unless they're being held accountable. And so I think the role of journalism and fact-checking is to help the public essentially punish an influential figure for lying. And so at the end of the day, the teeth is the public. And so that's why it is so important that we don't rely too heavily on just automation and tools, or frankly, even platforms, although I think the platforms are the Goliath, and so we do need to try to get them to help too.
Just on this, I think this is something that the US media in particular has been grappling with over the past 2 years, is how to talk about the claims made by the president that are clearly false. And I think that there's been a pretty painful lesson there where simply restating Trump said this is doing a great disservice to the audience. I think, again, our role as journalists is to provide the context for that, and I think we need to be finding very kind of clear ways to indicate that when a public figure says something clearly false, I don't think we should need to kind of hide behind, calling that a lie or calling out what is false. And I think what we've seen, particularly on kind of broadcast media in the US, is a reluctance to come out and say this is false, because they're more in the kind of habit of saying this person said this. I think we really have to be very careful about this kind of he said, she said sort of journalism in this context. And I think it's something that's an ongoing challenge.
Great. So I think we are at time. So I just want to thank the panelists for their remarks and thank the audience for your time. And please be in touch with us if you have any questions. All right. Untrue, and what are you filming? Excellent.